Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, here with another episode of Countdown to the Cup to get you ready for the 2024 Breeders' Cup at Del Mar. And this episode is focused on trainer Aidan O'Brien and the 11 horses that he is bringing over from Europe for the 2024 Breeders' Cup. This is going to be a great episode, particularly if you don't follow European racing that closely. We're going to have race replays. We're going to take a deeper dive into these 11 horses that he has running almost all on the turf, of course, highlighted by City of Troy, who's going to try to take on a big competition in the Breeders' Cup Classic, trying dirt for the first time. Before we get all to that, make sure to press that like and subscribe button here on NYRA Bets YouTube. Subscribing is entirely free of cost. Just make sure that you're notified when new videos are coming out, and we have plenty of content, whether it is these trainer-by-trainer videos focused on ones like Chad Brown and Bill Mott and Todd Pletcher and Bob Baffert, and of course, Aidan O'Brien, as well as many others, as well as some individual vignettes and videos focused on specific Breeders' Cup Classic contenders. We're also going to have top 5 videos. We have more videos coming for long shots. We have a capping the card for Juvenile Friday and for Classic Saturday. So like I said, make sure to press that subscribe button today. Also, make sure to download the NYRA Bets app and play the Breeders' Cup on NYRA Bets. We have a promo, Cup25. If you sign up and use that promo code, you get up to a $200 deposit match bonus and a free $25 bet. All right. Well, like I said, this episode is focused on Aidan O'Brien and the 11 horses he is bringing over for this year's Breeders' Cup at Del Mar, and highlighted by, of course, City of Troy. That's what everybody's going to be talking about. But before we talk about each of the individual horses, let's talk a little bit about Aidan's overall record at the Breeders' Cup. And over his career, it's quite interesting. He's obviously had a long and prosperous and storied career, brought over 177 starters in his career for the Breeders' Cup, wins at about a 10% rate, hits the board at about a 33% rate. Those are numbers that are well within where you see other top trainers. You see trainers like Todd Pletcher and Steve Asmussen and Bob Baffert and Bill Mott and Chad Brown, all around the same percentages, both in terms of winning as well as hitting the board. However, there are more ebbs and flows with O'Brien's successes at the Breeders' Cup. And in this way, he's very similar to a trainer like Bill Mott, who has had some incredible highs in the recent years, but also some incredible lows in the years before that. And O'Brien is somewhat similar. I was looking at some of his numbers a few years ago leading up to the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, and I had noticed just how cold he was from 2016 to 2021. In those years leading up to the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland, he was 3 for 63, less than 5% winning, under 30%, under 29%, even hitting the board. The last 2 years, quite a different story. 5 for 15 in terms of his starters winning that he brings over, 33% rate, and hitting the board at a 60% rate. 9 of the 15 starters he's brought over have finished in the money. Those are very strong numbers, needless to say. And I think it's notable that last year, of course, the Breeders' Cup held at Santa Anita was still able to do well out there. So I do think sometimes there's a perception somehow that Europeans do not do as well coming out to the West Coast. We actually had a video that I posted last week that kind of debunked that a little bit, and just looking specifically at Del Mar and the fact that I believe 42% of European horses have won turf races in the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar. Speaking of Del Mar, well, 2017 and 2021, those were the 2 years Del Mar hosted the Breeders' Cup. And in those 2 seasons, that was part of that very dry stretch for Aidan O'Brien. Only 1 for 19 during that stretch, 5 for 19 in the money. Obviously not as strong as you'd like to see coming into this year. That said, going back to what I mentioned earlier, had success last year at Santa Anita, able to bring these horses out to California and deal with the travel, deal with the acclimation. These 11 horses that he has just got in this week, and in fact, just got in on Friday and Saturday and Sunday, I should say. And we'll just be over here for a week, and then we'll ship out as soon as this is over. It's going to be very interesting to see. But the fact that they handled the travel last year so well to Santa Anita, that firmer turf course, I think it's notable that he's had that success. Obviously, he's going to need to reverse some trends at Del Mar, but I think he's got a really good group this year. Like I said, highlighted by City of Troy, but I don't think that's your most likely winner from his group of 11 horses that he's bringing over. So let's talk about his 11 horses that he is bringing over. And we'll start with City of Troy because, listen, that's what the people want to talk about. And he's going to be taking a shot in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He's going to be trying something he's never done before, which is running on dirt. Sired by Justify, the Triple Crown winner, out of a dam by Galileo. So you have the best of dirt and the best of turf in that pedigree. And we will see if this experiment works. Is 6 for 7 winning in his career. The only blemish was coming off of a significant layoff from October 2023 to May 2024, where he finished kind of well back in ninth place in the English 2000 Guineas to some very, very nice horses that we'll actually talk about later. Notable Speech, a horse like Resilient, Hatem. That was an outstanding race. And, just like I said, did not run particularly well that day, coming off of a long layoff. And I will say that is something you will see from O'Brien runners occasionally. I remember Auguste Rodin kind of struggled with this too, where a lot of times he struggled off a long layoff and would throw in kind of a befuddlingly bad race at times. So not that surprising. But otherwise, City of Troy has been impeccable and is coming off a win last time out in the Juddmonte International. And one of the things that I think is important to note about City of Troy is he is a front-running horse. He has good early speed. And we're going to watch this Juddmonte International here. And he's on the lead in the dark blue silks there with Ryan Moore up on the mount and is holding off a horse that's also excellent, Glandigan, in this race, but is able to take this Group 1 field over in England in gate-to-wire fashion. And like I said, once Brian Moore starts asking him for more, he finds more. He was dominant at 2. Aidan has even insinuated that maybe they've not let it out all the way they did when he was 2, and that maybe he's got even more early speed than they've been letting him show to this point, and that Ryan's going to probably have to show a lot more early speed on the dirt in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But you see just how strung out this field gets coming towards home, and City of Troy just keeps finding more on the front end. He's an incredibly impressive horse. Now, the question is, how much early speed does he have? Is he faster than Arthur's Ride? I have a hard time thinking that. Is he faster than Fierceness? I don't know about that. Is he faster than a horse like Highland Falls or Forever Young or Dermasotogake? Maybe. So I think it's reasonable to think he could be sitting third or fourth in the early going of this race. Maybe even second if things break right for him. I do think post position is going to be important. One of the things about European racing is post position is important in its own way, but you don't have that furious run into a turn the way that we have in the United States, where it's all about trying to save position going into the turn, and it is kind of a mad dash into that first turn at Del Mar to try to save as much ground as possible. So it'll be interesting to see, obviously, what post position draw City of Troy gets. Is he on the outside? Is he on the inside? How does he navigate that? How does Ryan Moore navigate that? Ryan Moore, of course, a brilliant jockey, but does not ride on the dirt very often. So it will be interesting to see how this plays out. He's been training on the synthetic in terms of City of Troy, looking very good doing so. He's going to be one of your top 2 choices. There's a lot of hype around him being in this race. Maybe you think he's a takeout reducer. And if you do, that's fantastic because you'll be able to get a better price on a horse that you do like. I think you have to take his chances seriously, even if you don't think he's necessarily a win candidate. I think he's going to run well. I think he just has too much talent not to run well. And more than anything, I give a tip of the cap to Aidan O'Brien because one of my favorite Breeders' Cup Classic moments was the 2001 Breeders' Cup Classic. Tisnow wins it for America over Saki, over Galileo, who was further back. And what made that race so great was that the great European horses, Galileo and the ARC winner, Saki, were in that race. The best in the world. Let's go head to head, see who can win. We're not even going to be running on our preferred surface. We're going to run on the dirt, going against the top North American dirt horses. I love it. I love the gamesmanship of that. And I'm just rooting for a great race, quite frankly, in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I think we'll get it. Now, obviously, there's 10 other horses that he's bringing over, and I think 10 really good ones, too. So let's talk a little bit about those. Let's start with Luxembourg, who's going to be in the turf. And Luxembourg's a fascinating horse because he's one I've always liked. But you could say maybe he's lost a little bit off of his fastball, maybe not quite as good as he was when he was a little bit younger. Now he's 5 years old and maybe has been a little diminished over time. The last couple of times out, not particularly good, losing badly in the King George VI and Queen Elizabeth Stakes, as well as losing last time out to an outstanding field, mind you, in the Grade 1 Irish Champions, Group 1 Irish Champion Stakes to Economics, Auguste Rodin, Shin Emperor. Very, very good field. So lost that race, but like I said, no disrespect in that. Going back 3 back, won the Coronation Cup, going 1.5 miles. And I thought when he won the Coronation Cup, because he had run overseas and didn't run particularly well overseas, ran a little bit better in the Neom Turf Cup and finished 4th that day, but really did not run well in the Dubai Turf. And I thought, well, maybe kind of, Luxembourg's best days were behind him. And then he wins that Coronation Cup. Now, to be fair to him, he was not a favored horse in either the King George VI or the Irish Champion Stakes. You had horses like Economics and Goliath and Auguste Rodin, who were much more heavily favored, and even Rebel's Romance and Blue Stocking. So you had a lot of other really top quality horses here. Otherwise, this is a horse that's been incredibly consistent for the most part throughout his career. 7 victories and 18 starts, 10 out of 18 hitting the board. But a lot of those wins did come early on in his career, back in 2021 and 2022, when he was 2 and 3 years old. So, now that he's kind of matured to 4 and 5, it's not been quite as, not winning quite as often. That Coronation Cup and really the Tattersall's Gold Cup are the 2 wins that he's had the last 2 years, both Group 1s, but again, maybe not quite as elite as he's been in the past. And we'll take a look at that last race, actually, in the Irish Champion Stakes. And again, up on the lead. So he's in the blue and red silks here, number 3 horse, and he's up on the lead. And that's a tough spot to be in against this level of competition, going up against Economics with the big blaze you see coming down the center, Auguste Rodin on the far outside in that blue and yellow silks, or blue and orange silks, I should say. And I just, a pair of outstanding horses. And he's trying to keep on as best he can, but ultimately fades back to 6th place in this race and is just overtaken by a better caliber of horse. So, like I said, I don't think there's any disrespect in that effort, but I do wonder if he's probably not quite as elite as he has been in the past. And I think is probably a little bit more of a horse that I'll be playing against in this race in some way. I'll be interested to see what his morning line price is and kind of how the public bets him, simply because the public tends to gravitate towards Aidan O'Brien horses on the turf, and understandably so. Now, I think the toughest field to handicap this entire weekend is going to be the mile, which is just an absolutely loaded field. You have Carl Spackler in there. You got Chili Flag going up against the boys. You have a Japanese horse like Geoglyph I've always liked. We did get the news that Geo Romantica is out. She will not be running. But you have Richard Mandela's horse Goliad, who's coming off a nice win. You have Johannes, who's easily the best West Coast turf horse in the country, or on the West Coast, and I think has a very useful running style in this particular race for Tim Yakteen. You got Cherie DeVoe's horse More Than Looks, who I'm actually higher on than Carl Spackler in this particular race. And then you got Charlie Appleby's Notable Speech, and that horse is a problem. That horse is 5 for 7 winning in his career, and the only 2 losses, one was over soft ground, and one was in the St. James Palace against Resilient and Henry Longfellow. I mean, outstanding horses, and he was even favored that day as a 3-2 favorite. And then on the far outside, or not the far outside, but further down near pre-entries, is Porta Fortuna, the daughter of Caravaggio, who's just made quick work of the filly and mare mile division overseas, winning the Coronation Stakes, the Falmouth Stakes, and the Matron Stakes in back-to-back races. That one's, I think, incredibly serious. And then you have a horse like Ramitelli for Chris Head. That one's coming off a great Group 1 over in Longchamp last time out. So, again, an incredibly loaded field. And within that field, you have Diego Velazquez for Aidan O'Brien, coming off a win last time out in a Group 2, a Group 3 win before that, and in the Meld Stakes, and last time out in the Solon Away. And one of the things you'll see about Diego Velazquez here is yet another horse up on the front end. He's in the purple and white silks with the big blaze up front in this race at Leopardstown, and is able to hold everybody off coming for home. And so another horse with good tactical speed. Now, is he going to challenge a horse like Carl Spackler up on the front end? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, he could. One thing I will say that is notable is that over the last 2 times Del Mar has hosted the Breeders' Cup in both 2017 and 2021, It's a relatively small sample size, only 10 turf route races, but there have been 0 gate-to-wire winners in any of those 10 races on the turf in the Breeders' Cup. When you look at how the turf played during their summer meet most recently at Del Mar, out of the 53 turf route races, only 19% of horses winning in gate-to-wire fashion. You can do it, but it is a little bit easier to kind of track the pace or come from well back off the pace on the turf at Del Mar going 2 turns. Something just to keep in mind. But I think Diego Velazquez, I think all these horses have their work cut out for them. I think, obviously a horse like Notable Speech is likely your favorite. I think Porta Fortuna's got to be considered up there as well. I think a lot of American money will go to Carl Spackler. I think a lot of, kind of smart money will go to, or wise guy money might go to a horse like More Than Looks. Some West Coast money might go to Johannes. It's going to be funny. It's going to be fun to see. I can't wait for this race. This is going to be easily the toughest race, I think, to handicap out of the whole weekend. Maybe you think Notable Speech is just better than everybody else and you move on, but I think it's a really competitive race. Now let's move on to the filly and mare turf and who he has running in this race. And he's got a few. He's got Content, Wingspan, and Ylang Ylang. And Content is a horse that is coming off 2 consecutive poor performances and really has not shown her best form the last couple of times out, finishing well back in the Opera at Longchamp and then last time out in the British Champion Fillies and Mares against a horse like Wingspan, who we'll talk about in a second, and Calpana. But if you go with, but here's the thing, those last 2 races over soft ground. So considering they were over soft ground, I'm willing to forgive those 2 efforts and think that, something, maybe this is a horse that just prefers firmer ground. Because if you look throughout her career, there's really just one race. If you go back and look, the Staffordstown Stud Stakes, that's the only time that she's really run well over soft ground, when she won that race, a Group 3. Every other time she's run over soft or yielding ground, it has not gone particularly well. So I think she'll appreciate the firmer ground out in California in this particular race. And I think it speaks to Aidan's confidence to bring this horse over to the United States for the Breeders' Cup after a pair of 10th and 11th place finishes. So, like I said, very interesting to see. Now with Content, this is the race 3 back, and this is the one she won at York, and she's on the far right-hand side, kind of running over a different portion of the ground that day. You have a horse like Emily Upjohn in the white silks and cap in the lead for John and Thaddy Gosden, and here you see what Content can do when she's at her best, and she's able to track down Emily Upjohn on that inside portion of the turf course and get the win here at York in a really good race. So again, has some ability, and I think it's just a matter of, does she get the ground that she prefers over here in North America in terms of it being a little bit firmer? Now, listen, you could also go and talk about Wingspan and Ylang Ylang. And these are 2 interesting horses. Wingspan coming off a 2nd place finish last time out in the British Champions Filly and Mare just a couple of weeks ago on October 19th to Calpana. And yet another Aidan O'Brien horse who likes to be near the front of the field. And here we pick this one up turning for home. Blue and red silks up on the lead. You see Calpana in the pink cap coming up past her and going by her ultimately to win this race. But I have to say, Wingspan really stays on here. The 3rd place horse is not making up that much ground coming for home. And while Calpana's pulling away, I do think Wingspan does a nice job at keeping on, actually kind of making up some ground for that final margin and only losing by 2. Like I said, relatively strung out field, and the 3rd place horse doesn't really make up much ground. So I thought still a very promising effort from the horse Wingspan, who is still a very lightly raced 3-year-old, daughter of Dubawi, and interestingly enough is not a group stage winner yet. Is Group 3 placed, is Group 2 placed, and is Group 1 placed. So she's been moving up the ranks from Group 3 to Group 2 to Group 1 the last 3 times out, hasn't won, but has really held her own and gotten progressively faster in terms of time form rating every single time out in her career, has never taken a step back. I think that is particularly notable. Now, the final of the 3 O'Brien runners in this race is Ylang Ylang. And Ylang Ylang is another horse that I think is quite fascinating for Aidan. And this is one coming off another bad effort over soft ground at Longchamp. And again, I'm willing to forgive that effort. But you go look two back. This is a horse that finished fourth behind Porta Fortuna, who I mentioned in the mile, as well as a horse like Soprano, who I think very highly of, who's also in this race in the Group 1 Matron Stakes at Leopardstown. And we'll take a look at this particular race. And Ylang Ylang here in those dark blue silks there, kind of in the middle of the track. And ultimately, Porta Fortuna just starts to put on a show. And this is why she's so impressive, I think, in the mile for that particular race. But you can see Ylang Ylangs finishing with interest and comes up and finishes fourth, very close to finishing second. And like I said, made up some nice ground there and finished with a significant amount of interest. She goes to the Opera and Longchamp and just, I don't think she really likes the ground that much, but she was ultimately 6-1 that day and was a pretty strong betting choice. And I think is another one that has a lot of talent, a lot of ability, has not really had that breakthrough win as a 3-year-old. Going back to the 2-year-old year, you saw her win the Phillies Mile, Group 1 over soft ground at Newmarket. But like I said, has not really won yet this year, is 0 for 5 and is actually 0 for 5 even hitting the board. But again, this was one that you might be able to get a pretty significant price on because of that form. Well, let's head to the juvenile ranks. And this is going to be a lot of fun because I think that there are some really fascinating juvenile runners in this race that he's got here. We'll start the juvenile turf with Henri Matisse. And this one is, going to be among your top choices, obviously, sired by Wooten Bassett, and is coming off, again, it sounded like a broken record here, a poor effort over soft ground at Longchamp. And this is what happens when you go to Longchamp. It's going to be soft ground. It's just, that's the way it is. French horses tend to love it. Other horses tend not to. So, one of those things. This is a horse that has been the betting favorite in 4 of 5 career starts, has won 3 of those, the first 3 of his career. In fact, won the Railway Stakes at Curragh, won the Irish Futurity at Curragh as well, then loses by less than a length in the Vincent O'Brien National Stakes to Scottish Worthy. And then last time out, loses to Camille Pissarro and some other nice horses in that Lagarde at Longchamp. But what we're going to do is we're going to watch the O'Brien at Curragh, and we're going to take a look at how he ran that day. And again, he's kind of coming up there on the outside in the orange and blue silks and making a run, but just not being able to quite get there. And is ultimately going to be second best to a really stubborn horse there, and winning that. I'm sorry, that was the Irish champions. And so again, looking at this race where he's able to get the win and coming from off the pace, and again, showing a good turn of foot, being able to stay on, it's very impressive in that regard. But again, the last 2 times out, a loss and a loss, stretching out to a mile. He's only previously run 7 furlongs. Another thing to mention is a lot of these 2-year-olds that Aidan is bringing over, they're trying a turn for the first time. Now, to be fair, he ran over a right-handed turn last time out at Longchamp. I think I'm more willing to say that the ground was not to his liking that day, though he does have a win over yielding ground at Curragh in the Railway Stakes. And a lot of these horses are running 6 and 7 furlongs, and they're doing it straight. And the pace dynamics are completely different when you start talking about that. So, again, I think Henri Matisse, an interesting horse in this race. And those juvenile turf races tend to be dominated by the Europeans in recent years. It'll be fascinating to see whether or not any of the Americans can compete. I think you have a couple of very nice Charlie Appleby horses actually in this field. Al Quadra, I think, is very good. And then Andrew Balding's got a horse that I really like a lot, New Century, who's coming off a win in the summer stakes last time out at Woodbine, earned a huge buyer speed figure as well. So I think that's one you got to take pretty seriously. So Henri Matisse might be more of a third choice in this race, which would be interesting from a value standpoint. Now, your most likely winner from this entire Aidan O'Brien group, and I would argue the most likely winner of the entire Breeders' Cup weekend, is Lake Victoria. This is the dominant, undefeated 2-year-old filly who is coming over to run in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly Turf. And Lake Victoria, like I said, a perfect 4 for 4. and is coming off an impressive win in that Chevrolet Park Stakes last time out at Newmarket, and has a pair of Group 1 victories already and 3 group stage victories overall. This is the daughter of Frankel and has the pedigree, has the ability, and is one of the more visually impressive replays to watch. You'll see her again, kind of further on the outside to the right of your screen in the orange and blue silks. And when Ryan Moore presses the button, it's see you later time. And right now he presses the button and she just explodes down the stretch and just starts pulling away easily from the rest of the competition, opening up lengths. She ultimately wins this race by 3. I don't think she's ever felt the whip, or if she did, it was just to keep her focused. And she's just being handridden to this point. She is an impressive filly, and she's going to be a tough one to beat in this particular spot. I think she's your most likely winner of the entire weekend, and she will probably be your shortest price, maybe outside of Torpedo Anna. But I even think she'll be a shorter price than Torpedo Anna. She's certainly, I think, a key to a lot of horizontal tickets on Juvenile Friday. If you're playing that Breeders' Cup Pick 5 on the Juvenile Friday, she certainly, I think, is going to be a single for a lot of folks and give you the flexibility to maybe spread a little bit more in some of the other races. Now, her stablemate's also going to be in this race, and that's Heaven's Gate, who's a nice horse and is coming off a win in the Weld Park Stakes last time out. And is a horse that has only missed the board once in her career, and that was 2 back, going 6 furlongs. Now she's stretching out a little bit more, but again, you have good pedigree here to suggest the distance won't be an issue, and has only ever run straight, though, has never run around a turn. Certainly something to keep in mind for when you're handicapping this. I know a lot of people will look at that for those young European horses if they've ever dealt with the turns before or not. I will say Aidan is one of the best at getting these horses ready, obviously, and tackling this 2-turn potential issue that you have. But Heaven's Gate, interesting horse here. We'll pick this one up, and this was at Curra, and this was the last race in the Weld Park. Ryan Moore aboard that day is able to kind of hold off Fiery Lucy here, coming right down the stretch. But again, you see just really digging in here those last few yards, and is able to get the win, number 7 horse there. And I thought, like I said, ran a really good race. Now, she certainly is a cut below and a class below Lake Victoria in terms of not going up against Group 1 competition yet, and she's not faced the level of competition that Lake Victoria has. But she's proven to be a very reliable horse over there and a very consistent horse at the very least. It'll be interesting to see who gets the ride. There's only one Ryan Moore, so he's only going to be able to ride one of these horses, and I presume that he's going to be riding Lake Victoria. So we'll see who Aidan gets up on Heaven's Gate. But again, a horse that might be just improving at the right time, could appreciate stretching out a little bit more, might actually appreciate the 2 turns, and a horse that has always attracted a lot of betting attention. Has gone off as the betting favorite in the last 4 starts, winning 2 of those. So another thing to keep in mind, that a very well thought of horse over there overseas. Now we'll go to the Juvenile Turf Sprint as the final 2 for O'Brien in this entire weekend. And again, you have a horse here in Whistlejacket, who I think might be one of your stronger favorites as well for the weekend. And Whistlejacket is coming off his 2nd place finish last time out over soft ground, not at Longchamp this time, I promise, at Newmarket instead. And actually ran well in France in Deauville the race before that, getting the win over Rachabar in the morning stakes. And, Whistlejacket's a really nice horse. You're going to see him on the inside here. And the thing that I like about Whistlejacket, no nay ever progeny, that inside move, you don't, really hugging the rail here, which you don't often see from European racing. They're usually on the other side of the track, but sometimes obviously the ground necessitates this, but really able to make a strong move there on the inside. And we'll watch it one more time. You'll see the green cap on the far inside, and really, like I said, really able to kind of let loose. Now, again, these are all straight shots. So dealing with a turn is going to be a new dynamic for these horses. But again, just showed a really impressive effort here on the inside, being able to draw away, keep up that pace, and ultimately get the win. So I was very impressed by Whistlejacket. Again, will be a horse that is among your top choices on the board in this particular race. 6 for 7 in the exacta in his career. Only one time out of the exacta, and that was a 4th place finish in the Norfolk Stakes at Royal Ascot in a 13-horse field. But like I said, last time out, finished second over soft ground. So you get back to the firm ground. Certainly something to keep in mind. Another one who has attracted a ton of betting interest, has been your betting line favorite, has been your post-time favorite, all 7 career starts. Now you could say Matthews only won 3 of them. So a little bit of a money burner. Maybe so, but he is incredibly reliable and is, I think, one of Aidan's better chances to win this weekend. Now, let's talk about the final of O'Brien's 11 horses, and that is not the Ideas of March, the Ides of March. And the Ides of March is a horse, again, coming off a win last time out. And this is a little bit of a Lake Victoria Heaven's Gate situation where Whistlejacket has faced probably the better competition, but Ides of March has run very well against maybe slightly lesser competition. So Ides of March is coming off a Group 3 win last time out, going 6 furlongs, again, going straight, and has gotten faster every career start, not really done anything wrong, and you could argue is kind of improving at the right time. Broke his maiden 2 back, and then comes right up to win that Group 3 last time out. And I thought looked really good doing it. And again, just kind of up on the front end there with Ryan Moore. And it's just being asked for more here and is continuing to find and is able to really start pulling away from everybody else in this field. I mean, visually, one of the more impressive performances you'll see. Now, again, you have to take into consideration the caliber of competition. This is Group 3 racing. And obviously, Whistlejacket's been facing the kind of the top 2-year-old sprinters during his campaign, as opposed to what Ides of March has been facing. But still, a very impressive horse, and one I think you got to take pretty seriously here, and who could be coming into things at the right time and might be able to present you a little bit more value than a horse like Whistlejacket, who I think everybody's going to look to. And I will say, out of all the turf divisions, we in the United States tend to do best with this juvenile turf sprint. Part of it might be that our, juveniles are just naturally more accustomed to going around turns at this point, and we have them conditioned a little bit better for that. But if there's going to be a race that America wins on the turf, it's more likely to be a turf sprint and a juvenile turf sprint at that. So, a horse like Governor Sam for George Weaver, I think, is one that you got to take pretty seriously. He's won 4 straight races, including 3 stakes races. Gate to Wire is a really nice horse for Todd Pletcher, who's coming off a second to Mentee in the Futurity. And then if Mentee decides to run, we'll see if that happens. I think Akoro Siege, who is a Japanese horse, is also outstanding potential runner in this particular race. So this is a deep race. This is not going to be just a walkover, I don't think, by Whistlejacket, which is why I said I think Lake Victoria is your most likely winner from these 11 O'Brien runners. All right, folks, we're going to stop there and wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Countdown to the Cup, going over Aidan O'Brien's potential contenders that he has running at Del Mar. Make sure to press that like button and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. And make sure to check out all of our great promotions on NYRA Bets. My name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races, and reminding you, friends, it's now post time.